Wow. It really is amazing, isn't it? I mean, the sheer amount of information we're bombarded with every single day. It's like a never-ending fire hose of digital stuff and trying to figure out what's actually important, what actually matters, like what's going to give you that edge. Oh, yeah, it can feel impossible sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about finding the signal in the noise, right? It's
Yeah.
not just about having tons of data. It's about understanding those core principles and then figuring out how they actually apply to your specific situation,
Yeah.
your specific challenges. And that's where we come in, right? To help make
Yeah.
sense of it all.
Absolutely. And for this deep dive, you've given us a really interesting set of materials to work with, all focused on the Certified Marketing Cloud Consultant exam. And now, even if you're not planning to take that specific exam, I still think there's a ton of value here for anyone who works with marketing technology. Or even just anyone who's kind of in that world, because ultimately these exam questions, they really highlight those fundamental concepts and those common pitfalls within the Marketing Cloud platform. So think of this like a crash course in best practices and a way to avoid some of those potential headaches down the road.
Yeah, and what's really cool about these exam questions is that they take like these really complex platform features and they kind of boil them down into these practical real-world scenarios. So our goal today is to really dissect these questions, uncover those key principles, and then hopefully equip you with a deeper understanding of, how to effectively manage and utilize marketing technology.
Okay, so let's jump right in with our first scenario here. So we've got Northern Trail Outfitters, and they're facing a bit of a challenge. Their email engagement data isn't showing up in their Salesforce contact records, and the question points to two potential reasons for this.
And the first reason, it really gets to the heart of something really fundamental. The use of email address as the subscriber key in Marketing Cloud.
Yeah, at first glance, that seems to make sense, right? I mean, email addresses, they're kind of like the universal identifier online. So what's the problem with using them?
Well, the problem is that an email address isn't always unique to a single person, right? You've got shared family accounts, you've got people forwarding emails to colleagues. So Marketing Cloud needs a truly unique identifier, like a contact ID or a dedicated subscriber key to make sure that engagement data gets linked back to the right person in Salesforce. If you're just relying on email address, that link can break down and then you end up with missing or misattributed data.
That makes a lot of sense. It's kind of like trying to track individual website logins when multiple people are using the same username. You just lose that one-to-one connection.
Exactly. And the second potential reason the question brings up is that individual level tracking might not be enabled in the Marketing Cloud configuration.
Now, you'd think that would be on by default, right? It seems kind of important. So what exactly does individual level tracking control?
So individual level tracking is what tells Marketing Cloud to capture all that detailed engagement data, like the opens, the clicks conversions, and then sync it back to Salesforce for each individual contact. If it's not enabled, Marketing Cloud might still be tracking overall campaign performance, but it won't be pushing that granular data down to those individual contact records in Salesforce. And, I can remember a specific situation where a client, they just couldn't figure out why their sales team had no visibility into which specific leads were engaging with marketing emails. And it turned out this setting was the culprit the whole time.
Huh, that's interesting. So yeah, if you're seeing similar gaps in your Salesforce data, those two areas that we just talked about, the subscriber key strategy and the individual level tracking setting, those are definitely worth double checking. Have you ever run into that yourself, where you just assumed that the data was flowing correctly, but then you found these like weird gaps? It's a good reminder to really think through your data model and your tracking configurations from the get-go.
Yeah, for sure. I think the main takeaway for everyone listening is to always make sure you have a truly unique identifier for your customer records when you're integrating marketing systems. Otherwise, you're going to be constantly battling data attribution errors.
All right, so let's move on to our second scenario. We've got a B2B company that wants to automatically trigger personalized email journeys for new contacts, specifically when those contacts are created within a key account in Salesforce.
And the best way to do that using Marketing Cloud Connect is to use the Salesforce data entry source and configure it to listen to the account object.
Ah, okay. So the data entry source acts as a trigger. How does listening to the account object actually make that happen?
Well, basically what it does is it lets you kick off a journey in Marketing Cloud based on something that happens over in Salesforce. And in this specific case, that something is the creation of a new contact record that's associated with a specific account. So when a new contact gets added to one of those designated key accounts in Salesforce, that triggers the journey, and the new contact gets automatically enrolled and starts receiving those personalized emails.
That sounds like a really smart way to do account-based marketing automation. Why is triggering off the account object so advantageous in a B2B context?
Well, because in B2B, a lot of times your focus is on that entire account relationship, right? Not just individual contacts. So by starting that journey at the account level, you make sure that as new people join a key account, they get pulled into the right communication flow automatically. And that creates a more unified and consistent experience for those important business clients.
So the system is smart enough to recognize, hey, a new person has joined this company that we care about, and then it automatically starts them down that appropriate engagement path.
Okay.
So what about other ways to trigger this journey? Why might those not be as ideal?
You could use a campaign entry source, but that's more for specific campaign-related activities, and it wouldn't be directly tied to what's happening within a Salesforce account. And relying solely on like the contact object's welcome email configuration that might miss that important account-specific context. You could potentially build a triggered automation in Automation Studio, but that would probably be a lot more complex to set up, and it wouldn't have that same seamless connection to the Salesforce account object that the Salesforce data entry source gives you.
Mhm.
So the real power here is that direct tie into that fundamental B2B unit, the account.
Yeah, it really highlights how choosing the right starting point for your automation is so crucial for aligning with your specific business goals. So I guess a question to ask yourself is when you're thinking about your own automation needs, what kinds of triggers are really going to get you those outcomes that you're looking for? Because different triggers definitely unlock different possibilities.
Definitely. The main takeaway here is to pick your automation entry point based on the core business entity that you're trying to engage with. And in B2B, a lot of times that's going to be the account.
All right, let's move on to our third scenario. Now, the Sales Cloud users at Northern Trail Outfitters, they need a way to create custom lists of leads and contacts within Salesforce so they can use them for targeted email sends in Content Builder, specifically using that send flow feature.
And the recommended approach here is to utilize a Salesforce campaign.
Salesforce campaigns, yeah, we hear about those a lot. So what makes them such a good fit for Sales Cloud users who are trying to create these email lists?
Well, Salesforce campaigns, they're designed specifically to organize and track those marketing and sales efforts that are aimed at specific groups of leads and contacts. And importantly, they're native to Salesforce, which means they're really easy for Sales Cloud users to work with because it's already part of their daily workflow. So within a campaign, users can add members, both leads and contacts, based on all sorts of different criteria. And then thanks to Marketing Cloud Connect, those campaign member lists, they become available right within the send flow in Content Builder. So marketers or even the sales users themselves, if they have the right permissions, can just select those lists for their email sends.
So it's a pretty seamless process for the sales team. They can build their target audience within Salesforce, which they're already using every day, and then that list is immediately ready to go for email sends in Marketing Cloud. So what about other options like Salesforce reports or data extensions? Why might those not be as effective in this particular case?
You can use Salesforce reports to generate lists of leads and contacts based on different criteria, but they don't have that same built-in integration with the send flow and Content Builder. You'd probably have to export that data and then import it into Marketing Cloud, which is extra steps. And data extensions, well, those live inside Marketing Cloud, so you could use them to store your targeted lists, but making Sales Cloud users create and manage those in Marketing Cloud, that adds friction to their workflow, and it means they have to learn a whole new interface. Synchronized data extensions could mirror data from Salesforce, but those are usually managed by marketing operations, and they might not be as flexible for sales users who need to create lists on the fly. So the key here is really ease of use and accessibility for that sales team.
Yeah, it's all about making the tools work for the people who need to use them. If it's not intuitive adoption, it's going to be a real struggle.
Exactly. I think the key takeaway here is to choose tools and workflows that integrate seamlessly with the platforms your team is already using. Minimize friction and maximize adoption.
All right, let's shift gears a bit and talk about managing multiple Marketing Cloud environments. So in this scenario, Northern Trail Outfitters has separate accounts for development, UAT or user acceptance testing, and their live production environment. They need a way to efficiently move Journey Builder configurations and data extensions between those instances.
And the right tool for that is Deployment Manager.
Deployment Manager. Okay. So it sounds like this tool is specifically built for this kind of situation. What exactly does it let you do?
Deployment Manager is part of Marketing Cloud, and it's designed specifically to help you move configurations and assets between different Marketing Cloud environments. This includes things like Journey Builder setups, data extensions, Automation Studio configurations, and more. It provides a really structured process so you can be confident that everything is consistent as you move your work from development to testing and then finally into your live production environment.
So it's kind of like having a pipeline for your marketing cloud builds, right? Ensuring everything is replicated correctly across the different stages. So what about some of the other options mentioned in the question, like Change Sets Configuration Manager and Setup
Hmm.
Assistant? Why aren't those the right tools for this job?
Chain sets are mainly used in Salesforce for moving metadata changes between Salesforce orgs. And while Marketing Cloud Connect ties the two platforms together, chain sets aren't designed to handle those Marketing Cloud-specific assets like Journey Builder configurations, Configuration Manager. Well, that's kind of a broad term. And while there might be tools that deal with configuration within Marketing Cloud, Deployment Manager is really the dedicated solution for moving things between different environments. And then Setup Assistant that's usually focused on setting up a brand new Marketing Cloud account, not really for the ongoing migration of things between existing environments. So Deployment Manager is really all about managing that life cycle across those different stages.
That makes sense. It's like
Yeah.
trying to use a hammer to screw in a screw, right? It might kind of work, but it's not the right tool for the job. It highlights how important it is to have dedicated tools for managing different environments in any technology platform to keep things organized and consistent.
Definitely. I think the key takeaway for you here is to use the specific deployment tools that the platform provides when you're working with multiple environments. That's going to help you keep things consistent and streamline your whole release process.
Perfect. All right. So our next question takes us into the world of mobile marketing. Northern Trail Outfitters wants to target customers who have specifically opted in to receive push notifications through their integrated mobile app.
And there are two correct ways to do that. Using Mobile Studio to create a mobile push filtered list and querying the mobile push demographics data view in Automation Studio.
Okay, so let's start with Mobile Studio. How does creating a mobile push filtered list help you target those opted-in users?
So Mobile Studio has specific tools and filters designed for engaging with your mobile app audience. When you create a mobile push filtered list, you can use those filters to target users based on specific mobile push attributes. And one of the key attributes is whether or not a device has opted in to receive push notifications. So that makes sure your list only includes people who have actually given you permission to send them those notifications.
Okay, so that's pretty straightforward. What about querying the mobile push demographics data view in Automation Studio? What kind of information is in that data view?
The mobile push demographics data view is basically a system-maintained data table within Marketing Cloud that stores all sorts of information about your mobile app users and how they interact with mobile push. So it includes stuff like unique device identifiers, the platform they're using, whether it's iOS or Android, and importantly, their preferences for push notifications opt-in. So by using SQL queries in Automation Studio, you can pull data from this view and create really targeted segments based on these attributes, specifically focusing on those who have opted in.
So one approach is more visual using the interface in Mobile Studio, while the other gives you more flexibility for complex segmentation through querying in Automation Studio. Are there times when you might choose one over the other?
Definitely. They serve slightly different needs. Mobile Studio's filtered lists are really good for quick and easy segmentation based on those common mobile push attributes.
Yeah.
But when you need more advanced logic, maybe you want to combine push notification preferences with other data you have in Marketing Cloud, then Automation Studio and querying that data view give you that extra power and flexibility. For example, you could target opted-in users who have also engaged with certain content within your app.
It really shows how important it is to understand the specific tools and data that each part of a platform like Marketing Cloud offers so you can effectively communicate with your audience across different channels. You wouldn't use an email tool to send an SMS message, and Mobile Push has its own set of specialized features and data.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think the main takeaway here is to utilize those channel-specific tools and data views within your marketing platform to make sure you're targeting the right people and you're respecting their communication preferences.
Absolutely. All right, let's move on to our next scenario. We have a marketing team that wants to keep a really close eye on how their email campaigns are performing. They're looking for hourly updates on key metrics like sends, opens, clicks so they can make adjustments as needed.
And the best way to get that level of frequent reporting is to use tracking extracts.
Tracking extracts.
Okay.
Tell me more about how those work and why they're a good fit for this hourly monitoring situation.
So tracking extracts let you export all that detailed tracking data from Marketing Cloud. All those key email performance metrics like sends, opens, clicks, bounces, and more. You can set them up to run on a recurring schedule. And for this specific case, you can have it run every hour. And then that data can be delivered to an FTP site or your enhanced FTP within Marketing Cloud, so the marketing team can easily access it and do their analysis and reporting.
So it's like an automated data pipeline constantly pumping out the latest performance numbers. What about the other options mentioned in the question, like directly querying data views, scheduling send logs, or generating scheduled reports every hour? Why might those not be as effective?
You can query data views to get near real-time data, but doing that every hour could put a lot of strain on your system resources, and the output might not be that easy to work with for quick analysis, scheduling and exporting send logs that gives you data about each individual email that's sent, but it doesn't really aggregate those key performance metrics like opens and clicks across a whole campaign. And scheduled reports, those are good for regular reporting, but they might not be as granular or flexible as tracking extracts.
Yeah.
Especially if your team wants to do their own custom analysis or maybe integrate that data with other business intelligence tools. So tracking extracts, they're really designed for this kind of regular detailed data retrieval for monitoring and optimization.
Yeah. So tracking extracts give you that nice balance of detail automation and flexibility for this near real-time performance monitoring. It's all about choosing the right method to not only get the data you need, but also to get it in a way that supports efficient workflows and quick decision making.
Yeah, exactly. The main takeaway here is to utilize those automated data extracts when you need frequent performance monitoring so you can optimize your marketing campaigns on the fly.
Makes sense, all right. So our seventh question dives into data integration challenges. A retailer's order management system generates data files every 20 minutes, and the file names change dynamically. They need to automate the process of importing that data into Marketing Cloud.
And the question highlights two key things to keep in mind when you're setting up a file drop automation in this scenario. The directory you use has to be inside the import folder, and using an external FTP site for file storage is a viable option.
Let's break that down. So first, the directory needs to be inside the import folder. Why is that so important for file drop automation?
Marketing Cloud's file drop automation works by monitoring specific folders within your Marketing Cloud account's enhanced FTP, and it looks for new files. So for that automation to work, those files have to be in that designated import folder structure. It's kind of like having a specific inbox that the system checks for new mail. If the mail is somewhere else, it's not going to get picked up.
Makes sense for organization and making sure the system knows where to look. So what about the second point, being able to use an external FTP site for file storage? How does that help with the challenge of those dynamically generated files coming from an external system?
A lot of times, the system that's creating the data files, in this case, the order management system, might be on a totally separate infrastructure, maybe even outside of the retailer's direct Marketing Cloud environment. And the great thing is Marketing Cloud's file drop automation isn't limited to just monitoring its own internal FTP. It can connect to and monitor external FTP servers too. So that means the order management system can keep doing its thing, generating those dynamically named files, and then Marketing Cloud can just grab those files from the external FTP site and start the import process automatically.
So it adds that flexibility for integrating with all sorts of different systems without forcing them to directly push files into Marketing Cloud itself. So what about the other options that are sometimes mentioned in these types of questions? Are there limits on the number of active file triggers per directory? Does it have to monitor only a single directory?
There might be some practical considerations when it comes to the number of automations or file drops in a single directory, just for performance reasons, especially if you have a really high volume of files.
Yep.
But the main thing when you're dealing with dynamically named files from an external system is to make sure that target directory is either within the right import structure or it's on an external FTP that Marketing Cloud can access. And then you need to configure the automation to look for those files based on some kind of pattern, even if the whole file name is changing.
It really showcases the power of Marketing Cloud's data integration capabilities and how important it is to not only know where your data is, but also understand the different ways the platform can connect to and bring in that data.
For sure. I think the takeaway here is to really leverage the flexibility of Marketing Cloud's file drop automation, including that ability to monitor external FTP sites so you can seamlessly integrate data from all sorts of external systems.
Awesome. So our eighth question, we're looking at a retail company that wants to send exclusive discount emails, but only to their most engaged subscribers.
And the most crucial thing they need to figure out before they even start thinking about who those subscribers are is how they're going to define engagement.
Yeah. It sounds obvious when you say it out loud, but it's one of those things that's easy to overlook, right? You can't target engaged subscribers if you don't actually know what engaged means in the context of your business.
Exactly. Engagement can mean a lot of different things. Are you looking at how often people open your emails? Are you looking at clicks on specific types of content, website visits from email links, purchase history, interactions with past campaigns? The metrics you choose to define engagement are going to directly determine who qualifies for those exclusive discounts. And if you don't have a clear, measurable definition, your targeting going to be all over the place. You might miss people who are actually really engaged, or you might end up giving discounts to people who didn't really need them.
So even though things like the type of discount you're offering, the best time to send the email, and even the sender's email address, those are all important pieces of the puzzle, they all come back to having that clear understanding of who your most engaged subscribers really are.
Yeah. Those things definitely contribute to the overall success of the campaign, but they're secondary to getting that target audience,
Yep.
right? If your definition of engagement is vague, your targeting is going to be vague too, no matter how good your offer is or how well you time your send.
It really makes you think about how you're defining and measuring engagement with your own audience. Are you just looking at surface level metrics, or are you digging deeper into those behaviors and interactions that really signal a high level of interest and potential for conversion? Because having that clear definition of engagement, that's the foundation for any successful targeted campaign.
Absolutely. I think the key insight here is that vague goals lead to vague results. So before you launch any campaign, clearly define your success metrics and figure out how you're going to measure them, especially when you're dealing with something as subjective as engagement.
Great point. All right, so moving on to our second to last question. We've got a development team that's building a web form, and they want to use the Marketing Cloud REST API to interact with a data extension, specifically to add new records or update existing ones.
And the absolutely essential configuration for this to work is granting read and write permissions for data extensions within the installed package.
Install packages, we've talked about those a bit before. They're like bundles of permissions that let external applications talk to Marketing Cloud, right? So why are read and write permissions for data extensions so important in this scenario?
So when a web form uses that REST API to try and add or change data in a Marketing Cloud data extension, it needs permission to do that. And that installed package acts as the authenticated connection between the web form and Marketing Cloud. By giving it read and write permissions specifically for data extensions, you're basically giving those API calls from the web form the keys to work with those specific data extensions. Without those permissions, the API calls are going to be rejected and the web form won't be able to do anything with the data extension. It's a fundamental security measure to make sure only authorized applications can mess with your Marketing Cloud data. It's kind of like when you give an app permission to access your contacts on your phone. The web form needs that same kind of permission to work with your Marketing Cloud data.
So you're giving the web form the specific keys it needs to access and modify that data in Marketing Cloud. So what about some other options you might see, like enabling the installed package for all business units, creating separate packages for each web form, or even storing those client ID and secret credentials right in the web form's code? Why are those not the best way to do things?
Enabling the package for all business units might make sense in some more complicated setups, but it's not the specific permission you need to work with data extensions. Creating a separate installed package for every single web form that's just going to create a ton of extra work, and a single well-configured package can usually handle multiple integrations. And storing those client ID and secret credentials in the front-end code, that's just asking for trouble, because those are sensitive, and if they're exposed, someone could misuse them. The main thing here is giving the web form the exact authorization it needs to interact with those data extensions. And that's what those read and write permissions in the installed package do.
It really emphasizes how important it is to understand API security best practices and stick to the principle of least privilege. Only give an application the bare minimum permissions it needs to do its job correctly and securely.
Couldn't agree more. The key takeaway here is to always follow that principle of least privilege when you're setting up API integrations. Only give the necessary permissions for the specific resources that are being accessed.
Okay, last question. This one focuses on data management within a Marketing Cloud instance that has multiple business units. Northern Trail Outfitters has a bunch of different BUs, and they all need access to the same data sources like their product catalog.
And the best way to handle that is to share data extensions from the top-level business unit.
Sharing from the top-level BU. Okay, so what are the advantages of that approach when you have multiple business units that all need the same data?
It's all about efficiency and consistency. When you share data extensions from that top-level business unit, you're creating a centralized place to manage that common data that everyone needs access to. You don't have to create and maintain separate copies of the same data in each individual business unit, which can easily lead to inconsistencies and a whole lot of extra work. So when you share a data extension, all the child business units can access and use that data, assuming you've set the right permissions, of course. That way, everyone's working with the same up-to-date information. And this is particularly useful for stuff like product catalogs, brand asset libraries, or shared customer segmentation lists.
So it helps keep everything in sync, and it reduces a lot of potential redundancy, which can become a nightmare in those complex platform setups.
What about some of the other options that are sometimes mentioned, like creating local copies of the data in each BU, setting up file transfers between BUs, or just giving everyone universal admin access? What are the downsides there?
Creating local copies, well, that almost guarantees you're going to have inconsistencies. If the product catalog gets updated in one BU, you have to manually make sure it's updated in all the others, which is a recipe for errors, and it takes a lot of time. Relying on file transfers, whether it's manual or automated, can be a pain to manage, and it might not give you that real-time data access that sharing does. Plus, it just adds unnecessary complexity to your whole data architecture. And giving everyone admin access across all BUs, that's a huge security risk, and it goes against that principle of least privilege we talked about earlier because it could expose sensitive data and configurations. So sharing from the top-level BU gives you that control efficiency and security while keeping your data accurate and maintaining that overall platform governance. It really highlights how important it is to have a clear data governance strategy, especially when you're dealing with complex marketing technology environments that involve multiple teams or business units. Centralizing the management of that shared data just makes sense from both an efficiency and an accuracy standpoint.
Absolutely. The main takeaway here is to put a centralized data management strategy in place, something like sharing data extensions from a top-level business unit. That's going to help ensure your data is consistent, and it'll reduce the amount of administrative overhead you have to deal with in those multi-business unit marketing cloud environments.
All right, well, that's it for this deep dive. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, everyone.